feel like it builds community. It gives people a place to come, meet your neighbors, recreate in a clean, safe environment, and that's what Hillsborough County Parks and Recreation is all about.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Kalina, and today on Trade Secrets, we're going to find out how Hillsborough County is saving energy, and it's super cool, so stay tuned. I'm here with Randy Clinworth, Hillsborough County's Energy Manager, and we're...
Good afternoon and welcome to the November 19th, 2018 regular meeting of the Hillsborough County City-County Planning Commission. We thank you for attending this meeting. Your comments and participation are encouraged. Please sign the register at the rear of the room and turn off any devices that may be a distraction. And if you wish to address the Commission on agenda items, we ask that you please complete the appropriate public comment sign-in sheet at the rear of the room now. When addressing the Commission, please state your name and address and speak directly into the microphone. For those of you who are not familiar with our process, the meeting will be conducted as follows. An agenda item will be introduced and staff will give a presentation with a 15-minute time limit. The applicant will be given the opportunity also to make a presentation with a 15-minute time limit. Following presentations, members of the public may address the Planning Commission when recognized by the chair, and public comment will be heard for 3 minutes per person. The applicant will then be afforded a 3-minute period for rebuttal or response. Planning commissioners will ask questions, public comment will be closed, and upon a motion, a second, and discussion, a vote will be taken. With that introduction, I will ask Commissioner Green to lead us in the prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise.
For your blessings on our leaders, and we ask that you give each one of us here today the wisdom to make the right choices so that our decisions be in the best interest of the citizens of Hillsborough County. These we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Green. Can we have a roll call, please?
Good afternoon, Dix.
Here.
Green.
Present.
Joseph.
Here.
Kress. Marino.
Here.
Thrower.
Here.
Wilds.
Here.
Dickerson. Rodriguez.
Here.
Dowdy.
Here.
Powell.
Here.
Thank you. You have a quorum.
Thank you. First item up is approval of the minutes for the regular meeting of October 8th, 2018, and the public hearing of Hillsborough County amendments on October 8th of 2018. Do we have any comments, questions, additions, deletions, or a motion to approve?
Second.
Have a motion by Commissioner Marino and a second by Commissioner Wilds. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. He's not? Okay. So that brings us to item 1F. Some of you may have noticed we have a new person up here. Ms. Willman, Commissioner Willman, but we need to have the standards of conduct and the oath of office to our new City of Tampa appointee.
Ma'am, could you rise? Could you turn your mic on too, please? Just repeat after me. I.
I,
Your name.
Jennifer Willman,
A Planning Commission appointee.
a Planning Commission appointee
of the Tampa City Council,
of the Tampa City Council,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will faithfully perform the duties
that I will faithfully perform the duties
of my appointed office,
of my appointed office,
and I will support and honor,
and I will support and honor,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
all applicable laws
all applicable laws
of the state of Florida,
of the state of Florida,
the city of Tampa,
the city of Tampa,
as well as the bylaws,
as well as the bylaws,
beliefs,
beliefs,
vision,
vision,
mission,
mission,
policies,
policies,
procedures,
procedures,
and standards of conduct
and standards of conduct
of the Hillsborough County City-County Planning Commission.
of the Hillsborough County City-County Planning Commission.
I hereby, through this oath,
I hereby, through this oath,
affirm that I will perform
affirm that I will perform
the duties of this public trust
the duties of this public trust
in a fair, equitable, and ethical manner,
in a fair, equitable, and ethical manner,
befitting the dignity
befitting the dignity
and responsibilities
and responsibilities
of the office.
of the office.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, after all that, Ms. Winwin, you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself and
Sure. As I told the city council when I was appointed on Thursday, just last week, that I see this kind of as a full circle moment for me. I started out as an intern at the Planning Commission in 1996. That was kind of when I knew I wanted to pursue this field. I had just graduated from USF in my Bachelor of Arts in Geography and was looking to further my education. And after my internship here, I went on to get a master's degree in community and regional planning at the University of Maryland. Ended up making my way back to Tampa in 2004, and I've been I was a consultant for a long time. Now earlier this year, I left my employment with Stantec. That was my most recent employer, and focusing on doing volunteer work and trying out new things. And I'm honored to be serving the community on this commission. Thank you.
well, thank you. We look forward to having you. Brings us to item number 2 on our agenda. Actually, yeah, let's go to item number 2. I'm sorry, I'm a little confused with the different paperwork. Election of officers. So I will turn it over to our attorney, Mr. Robin.
Good afternoon, everyone. You want me to conduct the nominations portion as well?
Yes.
Okay. Through the statement of interest at your last meeting, there were 3 commissioners who expressed an interest in the office of chair: Commissioner Dowdy, Commissioner Powell, and Commissioner Thrower. The bylaws provide that additional nominees can be placed in nomination at the meeting. So if there are any additional nominees, would you announce that at this time? If not, I'll close the nominations and ask for you to fill out your ballot, please, for chair. And you should have a ballot in front of you. If you don't, please let me know. Put your name on them too, please, and I'll come around and collect those.
Yeah, I got it. What do we do in the case of an overvote?
I guess I'll have to examine the signature. Excuse me, I'm having a little difficulty. I got multiple ballots back for different offices, and I didn't realize it at first. Tony is. Commissioner Thrower is our new chair. The votes were cast in the following manner: Commissioner Thrower by Commissioners Willman, Trent, Wilds, Thrower, Joseph, Powell, and Dix, and Commissioner Dowdy by Dowdy and Marino. So now we'll move on to the vice chair. We have the following who have expressed interest in the vice chair: Commissioners Dowdy, Joseph, Powell, Thrower, and Wilds. Commissioner Thrower will come out of that, obviously. So Commissioners Dowdy, Joseph, Powell, and Wilds, if you'll cast your vote for vice chair, I'll come around and pick those up. Okay, we have a split on the vice chair without a majority vote in favor of any one candidate. We have a vote for Commissioner Dowdy from Commissioner Joseph. We have 2 votes for Commissioner Powell from Commissioners Powell and Willman. We have 3 votes for Commissioner Joseph from Commissioners Dick, Dowdy, and Wilds. And we have another 3 votes for Commissioner Wilds from Commissioners Marino, Green, and Thrower. So we're going to need to re-vote. Does everybody have ballots?
On the top, too.
There's really no provision in the bylaws for winnowing down the ballot short of withdrawals of persons who have been nominated.
But it does call for a revote on a tie? Not a,
Well, and I think a majority as well. We have three votes, 3 votes. 2 votes and 1 vote for the 4 candidates.
Sorry, we don't have printed extra ballots, but everyone should have. You have extra ballots, Pedro? Pedro has, oh, yeah, everyone should have a yellow pad of paper, can write down vice chair, the person's name, and your name, please.
That'll work. The candidates, once again, just for everybody's review, Commissioners Dowdy, Joseph, Powell, and Wilds.
Thank you, sir.
Got this one in the wrong place, didn't I? Okay. This go round, we have Commissioner Joseph voting for Commissioner Dowdy. We have three votes for Commissioner Joseph from Commissioners Dowdy, Dix, and Powell. And we have, for Commissioner Wilds, we have the votes of Commissioner Willman, Green, Moreno, Wilds, and Thrower, which is a majority of those present. So congratulations, Commissioner Wilds. All right, let's move on to the member at large. And we have, of those expressing interest who have not already achieved or been appointed to office, Commissioners Dowdy, Joseph, and Powell. Are there any other nominations? Okay, we'll consider it closed. Please vote. Okay, for member at large, we have in favor of Commissioner Powell, Commissioners Willman and Powell. In favor of Commissioner Dowdy, we have Commissioners Dix and Wilds. And then we have the majority vote for Commissioner Joseph from Commissioners Green, Marino, Dowdy, Thrower, and Joseph. Congratulations. All right, we're down to the MPO member. Commissioners Dowdy and Green have expressed an interest in that office. Are there any other nominations? Okay, we'll close the nominations. If you'll give me your vote, please. And why don't we do the MPO at the same time? I'm sorry, that's the alternate. Let's do the first one first. Commissioner Powell, I see one for an MPO alternate, but not for the MPO. Would you mind giving me your vote on that by separate paper? Okay, I have votes for Commissioner Dowdy from Commissioners Thrower, Powell, again Powell, and I have votes for Commissioner Green from Commissioners Dowdy, Green, Willman, Marino, Dix, Wilds, and Joseph. So, Commissioner Green, you're the MPO representative or member, and we have the alternate yet to elect. You'll cast your votes for, I have interest expressed by Commissioners Dowdy, Kress, and Marino, unless there's any other nominations. I'll close the nominations on that then. All right, looks like we got another split vote. We've got Commissioner Dowdy by Commissioner Powell. Got Commissioners Marino by Commissioners Dix and Thrower. Sorry, I have two other votes for Commissioner Dowdy as well, from Wilds and Dowdy. So there's actually 3 votes there. There's 3 votes. No, there's 2 votes for Marino. And then I've got 4 votes for Commissioner Kress from Joseph, Green, Willman, and Marino.
Can I take myself out?
On the next round, yes. Yes. All right, we need to go one more round, folks.
I'll remove myself too. You can let Commissioner Kress be the alternate.
Acclimate. So moved.
Okay? All in favor?
Aye.
Means if you're not here, you get appointed.
It does happen that way.
Yeah, so we're just moving on. Okay. 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 Thank you. I first wanted to say that Commissioner Dowdy's done an excellent job as chairman, and I wanted to thank him for his leadership. So I enjoyed serving on board under you, and you've done an excellent job. So hopefully I can do as good. Okay, next up is public input. Is there anybody in the audience who has any comments or would like to make any comments on any items? Please come forward, state your name and address.
Perfect. Hi, Jeff Hills, 2901 West Stovall Street, Tampa. Congratulations on the elections. I'm curious. I have a comment on what is item number 4. So I don't know if this is the time to do it, or should I wait for number 4 to be presented and then make my comment?
You should wait till number 4.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Anyone else want to make any comments before we move on? Okay, no other public comments. We'll move on to, we have a change. We're going to do the industrial lands data presentation first, which is item number 5 on our agenda, and then we'll move back to item number 4. So.
Jennifer Malone with your Planning Commission staff. I'm here to present a brief update and overview about what we found over the past month looking at some of these industrial lands and the data that I've compiled for you today. We had some great questions at last month's briefing on one of our comprehensive plan amendments, so I'm just hoping to share that with you. Everything in your packet and that I'm going to show today is compiled for unincorporated Hillsborough County and the 3 jurisdictions. So we're providing a holistic picture of industrial lands in Hillsborough County in this area as a whole. So first, what you'll find in your packet is a future land use map of the industrial lands and where they're located in the county and the 3 jurisdictions. And I'm going to put that on the Elmo. I don't have a microphone, so I'm just going to talk about it back over here, the colors on the map. So I'll be right back. So what we'll see is that Hillsborough County actually has 3 industrial categories. They have a heavy industrial, a light industrial, and an industrial planned. So you have those 3 colors on the map kind of showing the different areas that they are around the county. Tampa has 2 industrial categories. They have a heavy and a light. Those are represented on the map too. Plant City and Temple Terrace only have industrial, and those are represented in pink because they only have 1 category for those industrial lands. Another trend, you'll see some of the industrial is located with water access for some port-related activity, as well as there's some located along those major corridors. Plant City has a cluster of industrial as well, which is on the map. And hopefully either you can see the map in your packet or it's on the, I'm not sure if it's on the screen, but everyone should have it in their packet as part of the attachment on this item. Okay. And so I'll just actually talk about some of the data that was on the map that I have on the PowerPoint. So we look at the numbers. There's some numbers on the map in the legend. Hillsborough County has about 14,000, approximately 15,000 acres of industrial total, but developable, only about 2,000 acres of developable. So 64% of the total industrial is located within that unincorporated Hillsborough County. Those sites typically have they're larger, just in the nature of the unincorporated county development pattern. They have more acreage than in the cities. So next we have the city of Tampa. We have about 4,793 acres of industrial in the city. Only about 307 of that is developable, and that represents about 21% of the total industrial is located in the city of Tampa. In Plant City, there's about 3,000 acres, developable little over 1,000. 15% is located in the city of Plant City. Temple Terrace has a really new industrial category. They only have about 85 acres. It was just created in 2015, and out of that, only 2 are developable. Statistically, it'll say 0% on your map in that inset where I have all of these numbers. That's because it represents less than 1% of industrial overall, since it's such a small piece of the puzzle, of the pie, really. Okay, so next I have a map showing where all of these developable. Oh, there it is. Where everything is developable in the cities and the unincorporated Hillsborough County. So overall, and so everything in pink is developable. That means it has an existing land use category of either agriculture or vacant, and it excludes wetlands. So that's how we mapped that and came up with that analysis, and that's about 3,000 acres overall is developable. So we see little pieces here and there kind of surrounding the area. And then last, I have a map that's going to show the plan amendment data for the past 10 years. The map shows the plan amendments to industrial or then changing away from industrial. So I'm going to put that on the Elmo. So the important thing to note with this map is that the purple dots represent going away from industrial. And so we're seeing a lot of those amendments over the last 10 years in the city of Tampa. The green dots are changing to industrial. So a lot of the other areas have more of a mix. Over the last 10 years, the city of Tampa has had 0 plan amendments to industrial, which is a trend that we noticed. Plant City had about 12, Hillsborough County had about 10, and Temple Terrace had 4 because they just created that category in 2015. So that's kind of representing some of that industrial land that they've converted over. If we're going from industrial, Tampa had the most. Temple Terrace has had 0, again, because they have a really new category. Hillsborough County's had about 5, and Plant City's had about 5. So our next step, some general questions I didn't answer today, but we can kind of think about is how much industrial is really needed and what is the industrial market and how has this changed in the area. But I hope we provided a nice picture of the puzzle. Bob McDonough is here from the City of Tampa to answer any questions you might have about industrial in the City of Tampa, and I'm available to answer any questions that were in your packet, any of that data and analysis that you might have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Nigel Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say you did a great job on this report. I know I didn't get back to you by email, but you guys have been dealing with me for a while on this industrial stuff. And I think this packet, this presentation for this meeting was a great deal to give the commissioners an idea of what's going on with the industrial land within the county and within the city. I do have a question for Mr. McDonough on the city stuff. You know, after listening to I'll let you introduce yourself.
Good morning. Good afternoon. Excuse me. Bob McDonough, City of Tampa.
Mr. McDonough, I had a question on what we've dealt with on this board a couple times now, places like Rattlesnake Point and some other areas like Ybor City, dealing with changes, requests for changes from industrial to something else. And we've kind of had a time on this board going back and forth on where the city wants to land on their industrial. Is industrial something that they want to move away from? Is it something they want to move towards? And where, of course, obviously within the boundaries of the city, where do they want to see this development and where do they not want to see this development? Could you speak to those?
I can try.
Thanks,
Actually, what she should have said, I will try to answer your questions. I didn't necessarily guarantee them. But again, unfortunately, it's really a case-by-case basis because there are a lot of things that come into it. Adjacencies, what's the next door neighbor? Is it a small parcel of land next to solid residential? Or is it actually a large chunk of industrial that could be redeveloped? You know, as she pointed out on the map, a lot of the industrial property is to support some of our large job creators. The Port of Tampa is a good example. That probably has the largest collection of industrial and heavy industrial land around it. But not to be overlooked is the airport as well. Drew Park has quite a bit as well. And this is the second time that we have seen a market shift. Historically, industrial land is more valuable than residential. But during the peak of the market in 2000, 2005, 6, 7, we saw a shift from industrial because the owners of those properties wanted to sell it and make more money. And here we are again in a residential boom, and we're seeing some of the same. So I don't have a simple one-size-fits-all. Rattlesnake Point is a good example of that. Actually, staff was not comfortable with some of the changes because there still are some heavy industrial uses out there. There is a sulfuric acid plant, and folks wanted to develop residential immediately adjacent to it. And we did not think that that was the highest and best use. But as we have seen, there has been a transition. If you recall, maybe not a long time ago, Westinghouse had an atomic power plant, a facility to build generators there for atomic power plants. And that's what pushed a lot of what went on there because it was waterborne. Gulf Marine had a ship repair facility there. And as the area around it has gentrified, that land has become more valuable, especially the fact that it's on waterfront. And so, I think that what will happen is on a case-by-case basis, you'll see city staff make recommendations that, yes, we do advocate for a change in some areas and some we don't. You know, we see a large portion in out near University of South Florida, which is still zoned industrial. You know, something that we can't forget is that industrial zoned land, especially when it's used for something like manufacturing, provides a lot of jobs, and it's also a very stable part of our tax base. Chrome Alloy, who's been a manufacturer here in Hillsborough County for a number of years, they're doing a joint venture right now. They're building another plant. That's 350 jobs and $139 million of investment. When you spend that much money on a plant, they don't move very often. And so again, it's great for our tax base, and it's also a very good source of employment. SAE, who is a manufacturer of aircraft simulators. They're going to be building a new plant next to the airport. Again, a great adjacency, and that is something they pay anywhere between 150 and 200% of the going wage in our marketplace. And again, when you spend $150 million on a plant, you're not going to pick up and leave the next week. And so from an economic point of view, we like the stability that some of this provides. You know, Drew Park, lots and lots of small businesses are located there, specifically because it's one of the few places you can do outside storage, which these zoning categories, it's not glamorous, but you know, if you had a scaffolding company or you had porta potties, again, not the most glamorous business in the world, but you have to have a place that allows outside storage. And so where these pockets are adjacent to each other, it makes sense to maintain that. Where it's spotty and the adjacencies might be residential, then we would advocate change. But you will see, I think, on a case-by-case basis, city staff will either advocate for or against. And again, we are bound by a plan, and we again, try to be consistent with that. But there are occasions from time to time where it does make sense to support a rezoning of a property.
Okay. Commissioner
Yeah.
Joseph.
Thank you. And I just, my question really stemmed from the fact that the comprehensive plan for the city of Tampa calls for a lot of what you spoke about. It calls for the importance of industrial areas economically and preserving these areas and the value that they impart to the community. But now that we've seen the trends through the numbers, we're seeing a trend in the other direction that they're not necessarily being preserved. So is that a future trend that the city wants to continue, or are we?
That is up to our elected body of officials, not necessarily the staff.
Okay.
We make recommendations, and oftentimes it goes to elected officials who might decide that otherwise, it might make sense to do something else. But as far as a comprehensive plan that's been developed by a staff and adopted by the city, we still stand by that because we feel that is an important segment of our employment.
Okay. And the reason I ask that is because we're coming up on this cycle of redoing them. So maybe that's an area we might need to look at in the future, massaging or changing somehow. That's kind of where I was leading to. So
Consistencies with adjacencies is probably the most important thing. Because again, when you talk about industrial uses, a lot of times you have noise and dust. And they might not be a consistent use immediately adjacent to other uses. But they do provide a lot of jobs, and it is a stable employment base.
Thank you.
Commissioner Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McDonough, I had a question similar to a point you just touched on, which has to do with the adjacencies of these industrial areas or industrial land, let's say, specifically in terms of its relative location to our strategic intermodal system, our freight system in particular.
Right.
I know our port is ramping up cargo operations, and no doubt we'll see a lot more trucks on the roads pretty soon. But I'm wondering if, and maybe this is a better question for Jennifer also, how does this data now get sort of factored into the bigger picture, let's say? Here you're showing trends and changes in industrial land uses, but we've got our port, who's like you mentioned, is really gearing up for a lot more freight, let's say. And so I'm wondering, from a land use and transportation point of view, how this all sort of connects.
Well, I think what you're starting to see is a compression of uses gathered immediately adjacent to transportation corridors. And the port's a great example of that. The Channel District at one time was basically full of machine shops and warehouses that supported port activities. The port went ahead and dredged the East Bay, which allowed them to bring in larger ships in the East Bay and not so deep along the Ybor Channel, so you saw a shift. And now they have the ability to take unit trains on the port property. And so again, you've seen some of these uses and more warehouses being compressed immediately adjacent to that. Another example of that is when they built the connector. So now you can go, without going through Ybor City or some of the adjacent neighborhoods, directly onto 75, and you can go all the way to Canada without hitting a red light. And so I think that what we're going to see is a continued compression of uses around our transportation assets.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from commissioners? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. New Chair.
Thanks. Okay, we are going to go back to item number 4. It's the presentation for Hillsborough County East Rural Agricultural Reserve, the initial findings report summary.
Pedro Parra, Planning Commission staff. I'm here again with the East Rural Agricultural Reserve Initial Findings Report. Well, this was completed in May of this year. It is still in draft form. The background to this item is that we had a request by the Board of County Commissioners to do an analysis of land uses and the agricultural uses and production in East Hillsborough County. The intent was to look at land use trends and changes in the current draft in the southeast Hillsborough. Originally, staff, when we got the request in-house, we looked at a boundary that included everything that was outside the urban service boundary on the east side of the county. When we brought back some of that initial data, the boundary was changed to what you have in front of you. It is based on data that comes from 2007 as point data, 2012, and 2017. The study was done in cooperation with a group of people, the county's development services, public works, public utilities, economic development, environmental protection, and the University of Florida, Institute of Florida, and Agricultural Services came together, and we talked over the data as it was assembled and as we moved to develop the report. The study area, as you see now, is comprised of 132,683 acres. It is bounded on the west by the urban service boundary minus the residential Plan 2 category. That was one of the changes to the original study area, was to remove the residential Plan 2. And then the southern border is Manatee County line, and the eastern boundary is Polk County line, and on the north is Highway 60. The report is divided into existing land use, building permits, future land use, and agricultural production. So if we begin with the existing land use, we also looked at the existing future land use policies related to agricultural uses in the county, and one of those was Objective 29, which says, in recognition of this, the importance of agriculture as an industry and as a valuable economic resource, Hillsborough County shall protect the economic viability of agricultural activities by recognizing and providing for unique characteristics in land use planning and land use development regulations. So the report also contains a table that summarizes the existing land use acreages for 2007 and 2017. I know that pie chart is a little hard to read, but basically it breaks down the uses. It shows that 50% of the existing land use is agricultural, and then there are 25% in public and quasi-public and institutions. In mining, there's 12%, vacant is 7%, single family is 2% approximately, natural resources is less than 1%, heavy industrial is less than 1%, and recreation open space is about 1%, with other lands comprising just under 1%. Again, the report does have the data in it, so I'm just going to walk through the existing findings for the existing land use. What we found is of the 14.5 decrease in agricultural production over a 10-year to over a decade, the reasons that were behind that reduction seem to be that there were mining increases over the past decade that resulted in a reduction in agricultural, and there was a statewide decline in citrus production for various reasons. Also, there was a smaller percentage of change. It was the result of changing land uses to natural preservation and heavy industrial, a much smaller percentage. And those changes that were from agricultural to residential were almost negligible, and there were no commercial increases. Under the building permits, again, the objective that pertains to building permits or building activity in the rural area was Objective 1 from the future land use that basically talks about proactively directing new growth inside of the urban service area. 80% of the population growth should be directed there, and that it should, at the same time, not impede existing agricultural uses. And the measure, the main measure that was pointed out to see whether this was working or not was to measure permit activity. So again, if you look at the chart, almost 90% of all development took place inside of the urban service area. So the findings from the building permit section showed that Objective 1 is being met. It's being achieved. It's being achieved to over the 80% that was the benchmark at about 90%. In the future land use section, the Objective 4 The rural area will provide areas for long-term agricultural uses and large lot, low-density rural residential uses which can exist without the threat of urban or suburban encroachment, with a goal that no more than 20% of the population growth within the county will occur in the rural area. So if you look at the table under the future land use, what we found in terms of the findings were that the predominant future land use categories are typically rural in nature. The large lot, low density, and the allowed uses. 87% of the land allows for natural preservation and development at 1 unit per 5 acres or larger. Under the agricultural production, there were 2 identified policies from the future land use. Objective 29, we looked at before, which recognized the importance of agricultural as an industry and a valuable economic resource. And then in addition, there was Objective 30, recognizing that the continued existence of agricultural activities is beneficial and that the county will develop in coordination with appropriate entities, economic incentives to encourage and expand agricultural activities. So at the same time, we want to preserve them where appropriately. We want to have the expansion of like uses, complementary uses. Again, there are tables within the report itself, but if we go back to the findings, the general findings, so in addition to what we talked about under the existing land use related to the changes and why they changed under mining and citrus production, we also found that the reduction in agricultural production does not necessarily equate to a loss of agricultural lands. And so what that can be taken to is that sometimes the loss through mining of a set of lands doesn't mean that it would always come out of agricultural production. The one exception would be those acres that go from agricultural to residential. They probably aren't going to move back into the agricultural market. The cost would be too high and prohibitive. The overall findings that are in the report are basically that it appears that the rural character is stable over the last decade. That there was little conversion to residential or commercial uses, that much of the decrease in agricultural land was due to conversion to mining, and the production value has increased, and that the urban service area and the goals and objectives of the policy seem to be working to stabilize that rural character. When this study was done in last year, the idea was that it might be furthered by the Board of County Commissioners through the Planning Commission or through their own departments, and it might look at future land use categories and description changes. It might consider impacts of that future development trends and population projections that you're working on now in terms of this area, and that there might then be changes to the rural area policies based on that discussion. And that is the end of my summary.
Okay, thank you. Before I ask if there's any questions from commissioners, I'm going to find out, is anyone in the public want to speak on this item? If so, please come forward, state your name and address.
Hi again. Jeff Hills, 2901 West Stovall Street, Tampa, 33629. So I know a little bit about land use and policies and plans, but I'm curious, having owned a good bit of property out here, as background, I hope the board understands that the WVR2, which was the Waimama Village 2 unit 3 acre, is actually a spinoff of the RP2 land use category as part of a planning, I believe it was a planning commission overlay neighborhood plan that won all sorts of awards. The residents, including myself, and now including the incoming Mariella Smith, County Commissioner, we spent a lot of time working with Planning Commission staff on creating this plan that basically improved a lot of the conditions under the previous RP2 land use category that helped spur development, spur residential development in particular, and in my case. And so it's curious to me that when this plan came out, somebody thought highly enough of the RP2 to take it out because it kind of contradicts the purpose of this plan, which is to look at agricultural uses and the rural nature of the area. They thought well enough of taking the RP2 out because obviously that was going to get developed, but they didn't think well enough to take the WVR2 out, which is actually an improved version of RP2. So I understand that I think the boundary was provided to the Planning Commission from, I was told, Development Services. But somebody from the Planning Commission should be looking at that going, it doesn't make sense to keep the WVR2 in this plan area. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment?
Commission members. Vin Marchetti, 401 East Jackson Street, Suite 2100, Tampa 33602, representing a myriad of different participants here. Wanted to start by saying that I think you should have received, actually staff received an email from Reed Fishbach this afternoon around 2 o'clock, I think. So Reed is heavily engaged with, as a broker and realtor, representing numerous agricultural property owners in eastern Hillsborough County. I think he has some very good comments that you'd probably want to look at along the way here. He's really tuned into the marketplace, tuned into agriculture, of course, as well. And I think it would be helpful if you consider his questions and comments that he had there on the report. The report is dated May of 2018. It's a little bit dated, I think. There's quite a bit of inventory that's additional inventory collected. I think data collected since that point in time, which the report was probably drafted. My guess is there are probably more infill projects now in the urban service area that have been completed in terms of land use and zoning and entitlements. So the report should reflect that. RP2 was left out. I understand that. I represent several RP2 landowners. We appreciate that in this interest. I'm interested in when you anticipate, Melissa, and this commission bring this to the county commission level for discussion. I don't think it's been heard by them for quite some time. And then just overall population projections, when you anticipate bringing those forward as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment on this item? Okay, no further public comment. We will I'll ask the commissioners. Any questions from commissioners? Okay. Yeah, Melissa, could you?
Okay. Okay, I'm happy to answer the questions. The report and the assessment of how we were doing on our policies was requested back in the spring. We don't have a timeline yet to bring it back to the Board of County Commissioners. That I am anticipating at the January land use meeting having an update for the Board of County Commissioners on the population projection and allocations, which certainly this relates to how we're doing in terms of growth in the rural area versus the urban service area plays into how much land is left in the urban service area to accommodate additional growth. So that is the only date that I have set at this point.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to item number 6 on our agenda. It's the first action item. It's City of Plant City fiscal year 19 through 23 capital improvements element schedule of projects. Welcome.
Hi, good afternoon, Commissioners. Melissa Dickens, Planning Commission staff. This is the annual update to the Plant City CIE schedule of projects. And this is an action item, and a resolution will be provided in your packet for a vote. A little bit about the review and the process. Chapter 163 in the Florida statutes requires that the schedule of projects or the list of projects that affect levels of service and are adopted in the comprehensive plan be updated on an annual basis. This update would replace the existing schedule that's in the comprehensive plan with the schedule that's in your packet. And in terms of process, City staff worked across multiple departments to identify projects in the CIP that affect levels of service, and these items then make up the schedule that is in your packet. This update is accomplished by ordinance rather than the typical plan amendment process, and then the plans of other agencies, such as those from the MPO or the school board, are incorporated by reference, and that's per an existing comprehensive plan policy. This slide shows a summary of the FY19 through FY23 schedule of projects. There are 3 main program areas that the projects fall into. Streets, which includes not only streets, but also pedestrian enhancements, sidewalk improvements and replacement, utilities, maintenance and operations, so things like water and sewer line and facility replacements and rehabilitations, and then also stormwater projects, which includes drainage pipe rehabilitation, watershed management plans, and paving and drainage improvements. And the total 5-year funding amount for these projects is approximately $13.8 million. Planning Commission staff examined these projects for consistency with the adopted goals, objectives, and policies in the Plant City Comprehensive Plan. We found it consistent with several aspects. First, the level of service priorities that are identified in the capital improvements element. One of the policies speaks to repair, replacement, or renovation of facilities, and the vast majority of the projects this year do just that: renovate, repair, or replace. We also examined policies coordinating with the 10-year water supply facilities work plan, as well as finding it consistent with the infrastructure sub-elements. So providing quality infrastructure to residents, reducing barriers to safe movement. Those were some of the policies and objectives that were called out. And the full list of policies and objectives that were examined are available in your staff report. In terms of next steps, the Plant City Commission will consider adopting this ordinance on December 10th, 2018. So that's where it will move in the process next. And then for a recommendation, your Planning Commission staff recommends that you approve the resolution in your packet, finding the proposed CIE schedule of projects update consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Plant City Comprehensive Plan.
Okay, thank you. Any public comment on this item? Okay, no public comment. Any questions from commissioners? Someone like to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that the Planning Commission approve the resolution recommending the fiscal year 19 to 23 CIE schedule of projects consistent with the Imagine 2040 Plant City Comp Plan.
Got a motion by Commissioner Dowdy. Is there a second? Second. Second by Commissioner Green. Any further discussion before we vote? No further discussion. All in favor say aye. 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 Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item number 7, City of Temple Terrace 2018 Capital Improvement Section Schedule of Projects Update.
Hi, I'm Melissa Dickens, Senior Planner with the Planning Commission staff, here to talk through the Temple Terrace Capital Improvement Section Schedule of Projects Update. And this, some of this may be a little bit familiar, so I will try to keep this portion brief. Again, this review is conducted in accordance with Chapter 163 in the Florida statutes. The update would replace the existing CIS schedule, with the schedule that is listed in your packets, and the list of projects in your packet will be updated with the CIS schedule title when it is adopted in the comprehensive plan. Again, this update is accomplished by ordinance, and the CIS schedule was reviewed for consistency with the comprehensive plan. I wanted to talk a little bit about the process for developing the Temple Terrace CIS schedule, as it is a little different than Plant City. First, Temple Terrace and Planning Commission staff worked to identify projects from the city's adopted CIP that affect an adopted level of service, so that was done collaboratively. City staff identified whether the project eliminated a deficiency, was intended to maintain level of service, or was planned for future growth. And city staff also requested that the list of 10-year or long-range transportation projects be incorporated as part of the CIS schedule. For those portions that were city projects within the first 5 years and specifically affected level of service, those were included in the report and the analysis in this presentation. This slide shows the summary of the CIS schedule of projects. You can see that there are 6 different program areas. There are a total of 81 projects for a 5-year funding amount of $17.5 million. And in terms of level of service priorities, the bulk of the funding, or approximately 79%, is for repair and renovation to maintain level of service. And the remainder of the funding are intended for are for projects intended for future growth or to eliminate a deficiency. And I'll touch on briefly a little bit on the next slide how that fits in with the comprehensive plan. Again, as part of the consistency review, Planning Commission staff examined the proposed CIS schedule for consistency with the adopted goals, objectives, and policies in the comprehensive plan. And a few of these policies are called out here, with the full list being identified in your staff report. First, the schedule is consistent with the direction for level of service priorities, which states that the capital improvement section schedule should be for projects that are for repair and replacement, eliminating deficiencies or planning for future growth. The schedule is also consistent with the funding criteria that's identified in the comprehensive plan, both in terms of revenue and in terms of timing. And then finally, the schedule of projects furthers several of the infrastructure sub-elements that are identified here, from potable water and wastewater, stormwater, management, solid waste, and recreation and open space. These include providing quality infrastructure and services to residents and ensuring optimal operation of facilities and services. And in terms of where we are in the process, the next step will be the Temple Terrace City Council meeting, where they will be determining the adoption by ordinance. That's scheduled for December 18th of this year. And then for a recommendation, your Planning Commission staff recommends that you find the 2018 CIS schedule of projects consistent with the Temple Terrace Comprehensive Plan.
Okay, thank you. Any public comment on this item? Okay, no public comment. Any questions from commissioners? Someone like to make a motion? Commissioner Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move for finding of consistency for Temple Terrace 2018 capital improvement schedule projects consistent with the Imagine 2040 Temple Terrace comprehensive plan.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Green, second by Commissioner Dowdy. Any further discussion before we vote? All in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we are moving on to item number 8. City of Tampa Land Development Code text amendments. I guess 8A, dwelling.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jennifer Malone. I'm here to present on the Land Development Code text amendments for David Hay. The first one, this is tackling the definition of a dwelling studio in the City of Tampa Land Development Code. It was a privately initiated amendment as part of the July 2018 cycle. It will add a definition for dwelling studio and remove the definition for dwelling efficiency in the code, and it will also establish a parking ratio for 0.5 units for each dwelling studio unit in the central business district, which is basically downtown Tampa is the central business district. We did find it consistent with the comprehensive plan because it does provide housing choices. We have policies about implementing the planning process and improvements, which is really defining those areas in the code where we can streamline things to better serve the public. We also found it consistent because we do have policies about reducing the parking requirements to promote transit. And that is our recommendation, to find this consistent with the Tampa Comprehensive Plan. And LaShawn Dock from the City of Tampa is here to answer any questions about the language, and I believe that the applicant here is here as well. Thank you.
Okay. Does the applicant want to say anything?
Good afternoon, Clayton Bricklemeyer Law Group, representing the applicant. Really, we're just available for questions. We appreciate the staff's help.
Okay, thank you. Any public comment on this item? Okay, no public comment. Any questions from commissioners? Commissioner?
Yeah, I have a question about, in the definition of studio, that it changed from having no square footage requirement to now having a square footage requirement, and I know this will be up to Tampa City Council to hash out the details, but I was just curious if there is, does this mean that it's setting a maximum square footage requirement for a studio? And what if the unit is more than 580 square feet? What happens there?
LaShawn Dock, City of Tampa Planning. What we've done is we would eliminate the definition for efficiency. We're finding that with building permits that are submitted, the developers are submitting requests for multifamily residential, but efficiency is rarely used. So the studio definition, you're correct, would replace that. The limit is at 580 square feet, but we also have other definitions within the code for dwelling units. There's multifamily, there's, and it will fall under that category. So if someone were to submit for multifamily dwelling units and it exceeded 580 square feet, then they would fall under the use category for multifamily.
Okay, Commissioner Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, LaShawn. Is this intended to address the issue of micro units?
Correct.
Okay. And
Correct.
Was there a range considered? You have a maximum floor area, but was there a minimum or a range considered for this category of dwelling units?
We didn't have a minimum. We had the maximum set. And that way, once you're over that maximum, then it would trigger you to go to the multifamily. But we had no minimum that we would put in
So that's
to the definition.
So that's not an issue?
We don't think it is, because when you submit, you still have to meet building code.
Okay.
Any developer that submits for it, they have to provide their restroom facilities, the kitchen, all your facilities have to be provided within that dwelling unit. So you'd have to provide a certain minimum square footage anyway to make it livable.
Okay. Well, you were finding livable units less than
Yes.
less than
Yes,
this. So
we
that's
are.
why I asked the question.
That has been the trend.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Nope. Commissioner Dix.
Just a question regarding the definition here. It provided that parking would now be required of 1/2 unit one parking space for each 1/2 unit. Is that kind of standard for urban areas, or did you guys just come up with that?
Yes. The applicant actually submitted a study, and it looked at different areas, and that was in half of the areas that were submitted and studied. That has been one of the standards. Some areas offer no parking within their code. So what we found was that cap of that 580 puts that limit. So if you have a mixed-use development, at least the units that are that 580 square footage or under, they would fall within that 0.5 ratio. And then above that, they have to provide 1-per-1.
So you feel relatively confident that that would be able to handle the parking requirements of building such a development as this downtown?
Well, certain developers, they're putting in different amenities and different things that are addressing other transportation alternatives. And by this code being applied to just downtown, there are other transportation options that will be made available now and in the future coming forward. So.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Green.
If I might, following up on Commissioner Dick's question, yes, this is a national trend, and I'm glad that we're having this conversation in Tampa. It's long overdue. I see this as a great opportunity to address affordable housing, workforce housing, and especially in the city, within the urban portions of the city. And I don't think the parking is would be an issue for a lot of people a lot younger than us who've decided already that they don't want to own a car under any circumstances. So I think this is good. This also dovetails with our mixed-use land use categories and supports those as well. So good, thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Someone like to make a motion? Commissioner Marino?
I move that we approve the attached resolution finding the proposed land development code text amendment related to regulations regarding studio dwelling units in the city of Tampa consistent with the Imagine 2040 Tampa Comprehensive Plan and forward this recommendation to Tampa City Council.
Okay, got a motion by Commissioner Marino. Do we have a second? Second by Commissioner. Okay. Any further questions, discussion before we vote?
Excuse me. Who? Yep. I'm sorry. Who made the second for the motion?
Commissioner Powell.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Powell. Yeah, we got a motion by Commissioner Marino, second by Commissioner Powell. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We're moving on to item 8B, City of Tampa Land Development Code text amendments, temporary special uses.
Jennifer Malone again with your Planning Commission staff presenting on behalf of David Hay on the Tampa Land Development Code for a text amendment temporary special events. This is also part of the July 2018 cycle and it is privately initiated. This request would establish parking regulations for temporary special events. It would also allow off-site parking up to a maximum of 5 miles from that temporary special event. This would also require the applicant to submit a detailed parking plan, 1 parking space for every 4 expected attendees, and it would also establish offsets for required parking. We did find this consistent with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan has several policies about allowing considerations of off-site parking, as well as providing for uniform implementation. This 5-mile radius will be applied uniformly for every special event and every applicant willing to have that permit. So we did find this consistent with the comprehensive plan, and LaShawn is here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Any public comment on this item?
I do believe the applicant is here as well.
Oh, the applicant. Would the applicant like to speak on this item? No? Okay. Any public comment on this item? Okay. No public comment. Any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Marino.
Yeah. My question was, in what type of events would qualify under this amendment? It's not, I'm assuming it's not a Bucks game or a Lightning game.
So it's my understanding, and LaShawn can further clarify, that there are city special events such as Gasparilla is the big one, and parades, etc.
Okay, so then a follow-up to that. There's, hold on, let me go back to where I was. In talking about, so the alternative, in reference to the alternative transportation modes, I guess the concern that I have is that in order to facilitate some of these events, you have to have road closures. And what my own personal experience has been is that if you're taking transit, you're only allowed to get to a certain point. And in some cases, that point is not really near the event. So in looking at this, my concern was that it kind of addresses the need for alternative modes, but you still have a situation where if you're an event goer, transit is not the best option because you're still pretty far away from the event. So that's one point. And the second point, for a regular transit rider, there's an inconvenience because now you can't get near to where you're going. And I'm thinking of, for example, going to TGH during Gasparilla, because you could be on that same bus to go to the parade and you're getting off and you're walking and you're kind of already in the parade. But if you're going to Gasparilla, your last chance is at Swan and Howard. Or I'm sorry, if you're going to TGH, your last chance at Swan and Howard, or you get on the interstate. So was there any consideration to figure out, could you make those closed roads maybe transit only, so you could allow a bus to go through at least closer towards the event time period, rather than, as soon as the road is closed, transit has no opportunity in that space.
Yes, LaShawn Dock, City of Tampa Planning. That part of it was not considered. This was, if I can just take a step back, this was initiated privately. What brought about this change was under current code, if you would apply for a temporary special event, you had to provide the parking. And as you just mentioned, you can only get so close to an event. But code would require you to provide 0.25 spaces per person based on the building occupancy code. And you have to provide these parking spaces. But how do you provide parking spaces for an event that you cannot bring a car to park? So this was developed as alternative methods in processing that request for that special event. Not so much as dealing with the roadway and the closure and opening of the roadway.
So then, for future events, is there a requirement of the event organizers to accommodate additional transit in order to meet that parking requirement? So to say like, if you have this geographic boundary that is part of your event, and a certain amount of transit cannot get into that zone, is there accommodation to say, okay, well, we have to bring in the zone a block further because now transit can serve the event and therefore lower the parking requirement because now additional ridership can access the event?
In a way it does what I believe you're stating, because what you would have to do is instead of providing those parking spaces, which you can't provide close to the event, it gives you those options to say your event goers will arrive at this event through alternative methods, whether it's public transportation, whether they ride share, whatever it may be. And a lot of people, sometimes they walk, well, in many cases, they walk from tent to tent during these events. So how do you accommodate for the parking for that? So this gives that option.
Okay. Thank you. And I say this
Does
as
that answer? I'm
yes,
sorry.
and I say as someone who has ridden on a HART bus with a bunch of pirates. So there is transit that's being used to access the event. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Any other questions, Commissioner?
Hi there. How many public parking spaces do we have in the downtown area? Like with parking garage at open surface?
I can't say offhand how many. I would have to research to say.
So I'm curious, with implementing this, how many events are going to be potentially impacted that could be legacy events, such as like Making Strides, which is a big event in downtown every year. And then, with this, is that going to affect an event like, such as that?
Well, the event, anyone that holds a special event, anyone that applies for a temporary special event would still be able to apply and receive consideration through the parking plan that they submit. So it would help in that way. Affect the event, how, I'm not certain of your question as to how it would affect the event.
Well, I'm saying if we don't know how many parking spaces, are not available right now, and then we implement this, are we going to potentially affect events that are legacy events? I'm just using Making Strides as an example since it was very recent. Is that going to push that type of event now someplace else? Just because of this, where it's people come from all over, the states, especially for such a big thing, and then now, okay, we've implemented this, and now some of that planning has already been done, I know, in those organizations for that event for 2019. Now if we implement this, are they going to have to now seek out, a different location, or can that event may not even be able to be held in Tampa?
No, this would not affect that. Because if the event is being held at any rate, you still can only get but so close parking with the vehicle. So I think you're concerned with the parking and what's available downtown during events. This would not affect it.
Okay, any other questions? Commissioner Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One last question, LaShawn.
Yes.
This is intended to address smaller private events, right? Or, I mean, public events are, I mean,
Correct.
They're going to happen and like they've always done, but we're
Correct,
talking
they
about
would.
smaller private events.
Correct, smaller temporary events.
Now, scale of private events. Now, we're not talking about the scale of a block party, somebody throwing a neighborhood
No.
event
This
like
is
that.
generally the tents you'll see in there.
Okay.
They may have a certain group organization that comes through, and you can walk through from tent to
So we're
tent.
talking about
and
something
have
at least
on a parcel.
Anywhere from well, not sure about numbers, but we're talking about a substantial number of people in attendance for something like this, nevertheless, though.
Sure.
Right,
yes.
okay, all right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yep, Commissioner Dix?
What is the tonight? So I was just going by what the tech guy said. Anyway, what's the current range for the temporary parking? In other words, allowing temporary parking?
Currently, you can have your temporary parking within a 5-mile radius of the event. And so what we did was we broke this down with the revision to actually further limit it. So depending on the proximity of your temporary special event, the closer you are with your tent and your special event to the actual event that is happening, it allows you a certain distance to have your parking accounted for. The further away you are from the actual event that occurs, then that's when that distance changes. So that's why you'll see the categories defined for less than a mile and then more than a mile.
So the maximum distance doesn't change with this?
The maximum distance would not change. At 5 miles, we took the distance, if we said from, let's say, downtown to the Raymond James Stadium. If someone wanted to provide parking there and then shuttle. But the one caveat is that you must provide that information as to how you're going to get your occupants to that, from that temporary parking to that event.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I do have one question. Looking at this, one of the items it said is added is establishment of one parking space for 4 expected attendees. However, previously it was for every attendee you had to provide 0.25 spaces, which comes out to the same number. So am I correct in looking at this? So it's basically the same. It was 1 parking space for 4 expected attendees before. So that hasn't changed. What this has done, in my looking at it, is allowed some flexibility for special events because it allows those special events that take into consideration public transportation or other means of getting there. So this is actually a good thing for some of these special events.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's
it
good.
allows that flexibility.
That's good.
So all the conditions you'll see noted under Note 2,
Yes.
under that table, in Table 1, Parking Table 1, that gives that. You have to provide within that parking plan those options.
Okay. Because that caught my attention, establishment of 1 parking space for 4 expected attendees. It first caught my attention when it said noon. I'm sitting there thinking the same thing. I think some of our other commissioners were thinking, how is this going to negatively affect some of the special events? But it's not. It's actually, it looks like it's a good thing for the special events.
And it's
I'm
put
reading it
there
right.
put there for clarification also, because
Okay.
one thing we have to think about with the code changes is how it could be implemented. So in the other end, on the opposite end, when they submit for a permit, can this be interpreted? Just for
Okay.
clarity, this is the requirement, and these are the options you have for providing.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Someone like to make a motion? Commissioner Green? Oh.
Move for a finding of Tampa Land Development Code text amendment temporary special event as being consistent with the Imagine 2040 Tampa Comprehensive Plan.
Okay. Motion by Commissioner Green, second by Commissioner Wiles. Any further discussion before we vote? All in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Next up is 9A, briefing for Hillsborough County Plan Amendment 18-16.
Can you hear now?
I think it was the other one.
You can hear.
This one works now, so we're good. You just have to turn it on. Oh, it does?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Unica Mills, Planning Commission staff. I'm here to present to you this afternoon HC CPA 1816. This is a privately initiated plan amendment. The subject property is located in the vicinity of Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard and North 69th Street. The property is located within the urban service area. It's also located within the East Orient Lake Community Planning Area. The applicant is requesting a future land use designation change from Research Corporate Park to Light Industrial Planned. Here is an aerial of the site. The site is depicted with the 3 stars. The request is small in scale at approximately 9 acres. Let's give you some more context. I'm going to zoom out to another aerial. North of the site, we have Chelsea Street here. We have east of the site, Orient Road. We have Interstate 4 west of the site, and Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, which is south of the site. Some of the uses in the area, as you can see along Chelsea, is a single-family residential here. To the west, we have a pocket of light industrial uses here. We have another pocket of single-family residential here. South of the site, there is a auto sales site here. We have a mobile home park here. And also along this corridor is a mixture of heavy industrial, heavy commercial, and we have a convenience store here. Currently, the future land use designation is, excuse me, Research Corporate Park. Other future land use designations in the area include Residential 12. We have light industrial, a pocket of light industrial here. Urban mixed use 20 here. You can barely tell the difference in color, but this is community mixed use 12 here, and this is public, quasi-public. The request again is to change a future land use designation to light industrial planned. Potential impacts of this site: if it was to develop with residential, it would have to develop under traditional neighborhood development. It could possibly receive up to 274 units, or for non-residential entitlements with a 1 FAR, it could possibly receive up to 398,000 square feet of non-residential uses. For the future land use designation change, there would not be the potential for residential development. And the floor area ratio would decrease to approximately 199,000 square feet for non-residential entitlements. Also with this, there would be the allowance of open storage with the change to light industrial planned. There is no action required on your part today. I will be back before you on December 10th for a public hearing, and I'll be before the Board of County Commissioners for a public hearing on December the 13th. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them at this time.
Okay. Any public comment on this item? Any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Unica, for the briefing. I was going to see if Jennifer's still here to see if this actually is going in the opposite direction of her trends analysis earlier she reported on. But I'm also curious, can you back up 1 or 2 slides where we're showing the potential? Yeah, this seems rather odd unless I'm understanding this wrong. So why? Why would someone go from this existing to, well, maybe that's not a question for you, but I'm just curious. It just seems odd.
Well, I would say for the light industrial planned, it's going to provide us with a little bit more assurity that planned is going to, because there's a residential pocket to the north along Chelsea, and the residential area is going to help us to provide for some more assurity of compatibility. That's what the light industrial plan is going to do for us. But as far as entitlements, I mean, that's up to the, the applicant for the decrease.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, no further questions. Thank you. We'll move on to Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan. Oh, actually, nope, that was it. We're moving on to Plant City Plan Amendments, 18-03.
Mark Etzen, Planning Commission staff. Mr. Collins and I are processing 4 plan amendments for the City of Plant City in the September 2018 cycle. 3 have been initiated by the City of Plant City, and 1 has been privately initiated. The first one is PC CPA 1803. This plan amendment, as I mentioned, was initiated by City of Plant City, and it's their interest in redeveloping the area where their current stadium sits, also the Randy Larson Sports Complex, and a passive recreational area known as the Urban Forest. They wish to redevelop this area as a mixed-use activity center with a sports theme. This gives you the general area of where the Plant City Stadium currently sits. It's north of East Park Road, west of South Park and Jim Johnson Roads, and the southeastern quadrant of the city. This is a little bit closer aerial of the site. You can see the Plant City Stadium in the lower right, also the Randy Larson Sports Complex just north of that, and you can see the heavily wooded area that is the Urban Forest. Around this area to the north is industrial lands, currently operated by Gordon Food Services. Additional industrial development to the east. To the south is the Walden Woods DRI. It does have some multifamily, attached single-family development there. And there's also a residential neighborhood to the west that is composed of single-family detached homes. What does this entail? As I noted, it was initiated by the City of Plant City. It's over 10 acres, so we will be processing it as a regular plan amendment, subject to state and regional review. It's almost 140 acres. The current land uses are parks, recreation and open space, public, semi-public, and commercial. And the request is to change this to mixed-use residential commercial. The plan amendment is composed of 5 parcels. 4 parcels are under the ownership of the City of Plant City, and 1 parcel is under the ownership of Hillsborough County. This shows you the land use plan as it sits today. You see the blue colors of the public, semi-public category, the green colors of the recreation and open space category, and the red of commercial. As I noted previously, to the north and east is industrial development. To the south is the Walden Woods DRI, which has been developed along this whole interface in commercial uses, industrial uses, and also in residential uses. And to the west is the residential single-family detached neighborhood that I mentioned previously. If the plan amendment was approved, it would change the map to this pink color, which represents the mixed-use residential commercial land use plan category in Plant City. What are the impacts? Currently, the property does not have any significant residential development potential. However, it does have almost 2 million square feet of entitlements for public, recreation, and commercial development, as you can see on the slide. If this was approved ultimately by the City Commission in early 2019, it would increase that to 1,000 dwelling units and about 720,000 square feet of commercial. That is basing our analysis on a mix of 35% non-residential and 65% residential development. Obviously, there's an infinite amount of mixes that potentially could be envisioned. I'm going to talk a moment about a text amendment that the City of Plant City has initiated also in concurrence with this map amendment. If that was also approved by the City Commission, it would increase those potentials to over 2,000 dwelling units for these 5 parcels and 1.5 million square feet of commercial development. And that concludes my briefing on this plan amendment. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions? Commissioner Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark, this is just sort of a general question that has to do with a public or park land use designation and how enduring it is, let's say. This has a major recreational and major public use associated with this large tract of land, and here it's being the amendment is to change it completely to something else. Maybe this isn't a fair question for you, Mark, but for our executive director, help me understand. I know this doesn't come up that frequently, but there have been instances where parks have changed, and people have asked, well, that's a park. How can it be redeveloped? What type of status does it have to have for it to remain a park, or, for that matter, for it to be
I can answer.
redeveloped?
Perhaps I can answer your question. This was put out for an RFP to the private sector for redevelopment. Part of that RFP is to actually retain, as I mentioned, the sports theme. So there will still be recreational complexes that will be ultimately built on this site, though they will be private versus public.
Ooh, that makes it even more thornier.
I will say that Plant City has a lot of land that's already dedicated to parks and recreation. Even with the removal of this 135 acres, they will still easily meet their adopted level of service for recreation and open space. Some of the passive park, which is the urban area, there are some wetlands and floodplains on that will continue to have to be preserved in their natural state. But the city felt that there was more opportunity here to develop this with the assistance of the private sector, still offering some of those amenities that you see from the park, but offering some additional uses as well, particularly some commercial uses and some residential uses as well.
Okay. I want to dig into this a little bit later with our executive director, but I'm just curious, though.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Commissioner Joseph?
So, Mark, thank you for the presentation. It was a great presentation. I think I'm feeling the echoes of what Commissioner Green is kind of saying over there. I want to understand better what the big picture is for this area from the city of Plant City and what the impetus was, because I understand that this is a better opportunity for future development, but there's, like you said with the numbers, there's a lot of different opportunities for future development. Why this specific one? Why do they have to lose what was the impetus that is this area a special area? Is this where they're trying to focus new growth and development or create a gateway?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. One is, you are correct, they're looking to develop a new activity center. This is an area that's been owned by the city that is becoming excessively costly for them to maintain, and I think there's an opportunity to have a public-private partnership in this regard. They're looking for substantial investment in this area. They did go through the RFP process. They're still working through those negotiations, but they're going well. They're anticipating an initial investment from the private developer of over $50 million, with more to come after that. I do have some of the materials that were supplied to the City Commission for their presentation that they received from the developer, I believe, a month and a half ago, and I'll try to make those available in your packets for the public hearing next month. But the thought, I think, generally from the city was that this is a win-win where we could bring additional investment in the city, offer additional employment opportunities, relieve the city of some of the financial burden that they've experienced with this site, and to offer a new, as I said, activity node that will be an asset to the community.
Okay. And one second part to that question, it's excellent answer to the question. That's exactly what I was looking for. Okay. Now that we're kind of going in this direction of redevelopment, what input has the community around this area had, or are we going to hear that later on? Does that come in your next when you?
Well, I will make some outreach to the city staff to find out exactly how they've conducted their outreach. I do know it's been extensively covered in the press and by the local newspaper, and also through the public meeting process of the city commission. I'm not sure what other public outreach they're doing, other than they will be required to do a plan development zoning district, and that will go through not only the public hearing, that will go through the same public hearing process for that we are going through for this plan amendment. Everyone within 250 feet will be notified of this plan amendment, but they'll also be notified of the zoning when that takes place.
Okay. And one last personal curiosity, is there any affordable housing being discussed in the realms of any of this, whispered about or anything, or is this more
believe
commercial?
there is, but I will try to inquire about that and be prepared to answer that at your meeting in December.
Thank you, sir.
I don't want to misspeak. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay, any other questions? Commissioner Dix?
Thank you. I'm sorry I missed part of that. I read through it. I know you always read that presentation. And since it's in the form of a question, I'll just ask you a question. Isn't it true that while the concern is on the parks for the city of Plant City, isn't it true that the elected officials have a tendency to want to promote parks and have actually moved to expand development of additional parks in the north and the northeastern part of the city, which is where the expected growth pattern of the city happens to be?
That is correct. Plant City is very proud of their parks division, and rightly so. They have a very excellent area that they serve. They not only serve Plant City proper, but also eastern Hillsborough County. The area that you're particularly talking about is north of the interstate, east of State Road 39. There's a new park they're starting to develop there called McIntosh Park, which is about 363 acres. Right now it's being mainly used for passive recreational type of uses, but I think they plan on doing more of that in the future. Of course, there's some other opportunities up in that area as well.
And one more question, and this is coming from somebody who's particularly biased towards the urban forest, which I hate to see the city have to part with since we worked so hard to develop it. But that can really be supplanted in the areas that you're talking about north of the city. But in the last page, last section of paragraph 2 on your opening presentation, it talks about how this new development area will be really built upon recreation and the sports theme, so that while it may be a commercial development, it is, I don't want to go back to what you were talking about, the focus is that it would be kind of a public-private partnership, and still the emphasis would be placed on sports and recreation.
That's a requirement of the RFP that they went out with, and that is the early site plans I've been seeing develop that as a major component. There are discussions about taking down the current stadium, taking down some of the fields at the Randy Larson Center, but having them relocated and rebuilt. So there'll still be a significant sports footprint there after the development is done.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. We'll move on to Plant City Comprehensive Plan Amendment 18-04.
As I mentioned previously, again, Mark Hudson, Planning Commission staff, this is the text amendment that goes along with the map amendment that we just finished discussing. Again, it is initiated by the City of Plant City. It's textual in nature, again, subject to state and regional review, and it's basically modifying the language for the mixed-use residential commercial land use plan category. Specifically, it's designed in such a way that it will only affect these 5 parcels. It will not affect any other parcels within the city that has this designation as well. This is a lot of text on this slide. I just want to show you that the text to be reviewed for your December 10th public hearing is composed of about a paragraph of text, so it's not extensive amount of review to evaluate it. But to give you a little idea, this is what is being proposed within that textual change. For these 5 parcels only, it would increase the number of dwelling units allowed per acre from 12 to 24, would increase the FAR from 0.35 to 0.75, and widen the required mix of uses from in the residential category from a 35% minimum to an 85% maximum, and a commercial from a 15% minimum to a 65% maximum. I do want to point out this graphic that's on this slide. This is an early site plan that's being developed for the site. I expect it will have major modifications by the time it gets in front of the City Commission for the zoning change, but it does show their plans on continuing to have a significant amount of fields and a stadium on the site, though relocated from its current site. And also shows you some of the residential and commercial component that they're starting to envision. And that concludes my presentation for 1804, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions from commissioners? Okay, no questions. We'll move on to Plant City Comprehensive Plan Amendment 18-05.
Again, Mark Hudson, Planning Commission staff. PCCPA 1805 is about as far from the spectrum of the one we spoke of as you can get. It's affecting a single lot and a single home. This is a map amendment that was initiated on bequest of the city attorney for Plant City and the county attorney have been working to try to correct some jurisdictional lines in the city to make them a little bit clearer. This shows you the location of the site. It's at 3001 Vienna Senna Street. It's near the Walden Lakes development in a development called Walden Point in the southwestern quadrant of the city. This shows you a little bit close-up of the area. This is a residential subdivision, as I said, called Walden Point. There's over 100 homes in the subdivision, of all of which only one was developed in unincorporated county. And we're bringing this parcel into the city, so the whole development is within the city of Plant City. This is the home. The city actually spoke to the owner, and they're in perfect agreement of coming into the city. It's obviously, it's result of an annexation, small scale being only 0.28 of an acre, going from Hillsborough County Residential 1 to Plant City Residential 4. This shows you the future land use map today, and you can see the more beige color of the residential 4 in Plant City, and you can see the light green color of residential 1 in unincorporated county. And when that annexation and plan amendment, if it's approved by the City Commission early in 2019, it will change the color to be the same as the remainder of Walden Point. There are no impacts. There's allowances for one dwelling unit there today. After we go through this whole process, it will still be one dwelling unit. And that concludes my presentation, Chairman. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions? Commissioner Dix?
Yeah, just one. I presume that somehow they got on city water?
They are on city water, but they're developed to county standards, but they do have city water and sewer.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Nope. We'll move on to Plant City Comprehensive Plan Amendment 18-06.
This is the only plan amendment that has been privately initiated. Again, Mark Hudson, Planning Commission staff, PCCPA 1806. This is over on the southeastern quadrant near County Line Road, but the actual location is west of South Wiggins Road and at the intersection where it hits a Rice Road. This is the property that's outlined in the lavender dashed line. What you can see on the left side of the screen is the mined out area of the old Coronet mine. On the right side of your screen, you can see some of the area that is currently being undeveloped in Plant City with industrial uses. As I mentioned, this is privately initiated. It's the result of an annexation that's in process. It's about 65 acres, therefore it will require state and regional review. It's going from Hillsborough County Residential 1 to Plant City Industrial, and also to bring it into the I-4 Tech Corridor overlay as the remainder of the property to the east is already. This shows you the land use plan categories for both the county and the city. You can see that it currently has the light green color of the residential 1 for unincorporated Hillsborough County. To the left of your screen is the gray color of Hillsborough County Industrial, and to the right is the gray color of Plant City Industrial. And if approved by the City Commission in early 2019, the colors would change to the industrial of Plant City within that area. What are the impacts? Currently, the area could be subdivided for 64 dwelling units. If it becomes within the city, it could potentially allow up to 1.4 million square feet of industrial uses. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, any questions? Okay, thank you.
Chairman,
Commissioner Green.
Thank you. This is another one that's going in the opposite direction of the earlier report, but
this is a significant corridor for Plant City. They put utilities a few years ago down County Line Road.
Yep.
And if you have driven that road recently, of course, you have Lakeland on one side and Plant City on the other. The industrial growth in that corridor has been significant. Several million square feet of warehousing in particular, distribution has been built, and many more is in the permitting pipeline as well.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to item number 11. It's the City of Temple Terrace Comprehensive Plan Amendment briefing for 18-03.
Good afternoon. Jay Collins, Planning Commission staff. Mr. Hudson and I are working on 2 amendments for the September cycle for the City of Temple Terrace, and they are 1803 and 1804. The first one, 1803, is a privately initiated map amendment. Basically, we are just south of the Hillsborough River, just east of the Hillsborough River along Temple Terrace Parkway at the intersection with 78th. This is the aerial showing you just what I spoke of. You can see there, if you know the area, this is a driving range. It is owned by Florida College currently, and perhaps like a par 3 executive course on the back side of it. To the west immediately, that is still part of Florida College. There's some athletic fields, some gymnasiums and such that they own there. The majority of Florida College's campus is on the west side of the river. The heavily wooded area just to the north, there is a park for the City of Temple Terrace that you can access off of 78th, winds back there and goes down to the river. It's a very nice old park. And you'll also see the single-family detached neighborhoods to the east along 78th and then winding back into that neighborhood. On the south side of Temple Terrace Highway, there's a variety of different uses. You'll see some apartment complexes that are there as well as some commercial uses. So what we just spoke of is privately initiated. This is a regular amendment, being that it is 34.65 acres, so this will go to the state and regional review. This is commercial in residential 4 to residential 9. So going down and looking at the map itself, you can see, you might wonder, well, why is it that there's some commercial that's in it and some commercial that's not in it? This is part of a parent parcel that's just over 40 acres. So if you saw that aerial to begin with, basically this is all of the driving range and the par 3 course, and then what's in the front of it is the parking lot and the clubhouse, if you will, for that facility. You'll also notice the residential 4 directly to the east, residential 9 to the northeast of the subject site. Again, the commercial along Temple Terrace Highway, as well as commercial across the street on the south side, and that dark brown is residential 18, and there's also some unincorporated county properties in here, that orange being residential 12, as well as some residential 9s. Here it is, simply the proposed showing the residential 9. So the maximum and potentials for the density and intensity here, currently 147 dwelling units between that commercial and the residential 4, just over 42,000 square feet of commercial and office uses. And again, what we're speaking of here is only what is asked to be changed, not the front commercial portion of it. The potential then is 311 dwelling units. The neighborhood serving commercial and office uses of 377,000. As always, we put the maximums down here. And again, this is a potential consideration of those neighborhood serving commercial uses. So there's a variety of different policy language in Temple Terrace's comprehensive plan, as well as language within Temple Terrace's zoning code for those non-residential uses. Questions to this amendment? And that concludes that.
Yep.
Concludes that.
Any questions? Okay, move on to the next one, 18-04.
18-04. We have had a little bit of a streak here with some industrial conversation today, so we'll end this with some industrial conversation today. This is in the northeastern part of the city of Temple Terrace. Basically, where are we? We're along US 301, Hardy, and Sly in this various area, and this is an industrial park called the 301 Industrial Park. You can see it here, the plate development that is typical of any industrial park, whether you're in Florida or Kansas, with the big plate development that you have here. So this is privately initiated. This is an annexation going into the city. It's small scale at 4.13 acres. Currently in unincorporated county, it has a community mixed-use 12 designation, which does allow for light industrial uses. And to Temple Terrace, it would be an industrial land use. So you can see today what the actual future land uses are in the city of Temple Terrace. Basically, everything on the west side of this is in the city of Temple Terrace. All that gray is the industrial. There's also some community mixed-use 12 for Temple Terrace. You'll see it in the county as well as in the city. It's they mirror each other in their colors, and they mirror each other very much in what it is that they are allowed. Here's the industrial. So the potentials of density and intensity here. Today in the county, obviously, you would have 49 dwelling units, being that it's community mixed use 12. This is built, as you saw, and it is an established industrial park. So really what we're looking at here is an increase in the amount of industrial uses as the FAR would increase from 0.5 in the county to 0.65 in the city of Temple Terrace. Temple Terrace also, if it's approved, would restrict the site primarily to industrial uses and those commercial uses that are of support to the industrial use. And that concludes my presentation to this one. Thank you.
Okay, any questions? Okay, no questions. We'll move on to the Executive Director's report.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Melissa Zornita, Executive Director. Before you at your seats, you should have a list of different meetings and things that I or staff have been attending. To highlight a couple of things, you'll see on there a number of times East Fowler Avenue. Pedro Parra has been meeting with the stakeholders who are involved in the Innovation Place area, their board members, to get input on the future vision for East Fowler Avenue. We've done a significant body of work in terms of data and analysis about what the development trends have been there, what some of the potential could be for that roadway, and are getting close to moving forward with some recommendations for land use changes in that area, but wanted to get their members' buy-in. Important to note, earlier in October 17th, I was asked to attend a Board of County Commissioners meeting to discuss plan amendment fees. There was an interest on the part of the County Commission to see the fees related to county plan amendments increased. They've asked that we did a study in 2016 related to the fees that showed Tyndale Oliver was the consultant who did that study. It showed that the fees could be increased to about $4,000 per plan amendment. At that time, there were some things that were asked that I go and look at the plan amendment process, and if you'll recall, we employed a group from the University of South Florida to do a Six Sigma efficiency study of the plan amendment process. That was completed the end of 2017, and we've been implementing it. So I'm working with the county now based on the direction of the board at that meeting on updating our fee study and looking at including what the fees might be, because we're a big part of the review, but there's another part of the review that is done by County Public Works, who reviews the application, EPC, the Sheriff's Department. So the scope of what is being looked at in the update is to try to be as comprehensive as possible with that. And the motion by the Board of County Commissioners was to bring back that information as part of the budget process. So that's a pretty quick turnaround to get it, as in addition to also get stakeholder input, because that's something that's really important, because we got some stakeholder input back in 2016, but it's been 2 years. We need to re-engage with that. So all of that being said, early next year, we'll be bringing this information to you all. That was one of the things that was important to me, was that when they brought this up, the Planning Commission had not made a recommendation on that study. And so I felt procedurally it was really important that we get it back to you all to be updated and to make a recommendation. So that's something to look forward to in 2019. Those are always robust discussions about fees. Also in your packet under the Executive Director's report is the 2019 meeting schedule. A couple dates are highlighted in yellow because they are not the second Monday of the month. That's in July. Utilizing the fourth Monday there, July 22nd. And Veterans Day is once again observed on the second Monday of November. So I point that out because November 18th will, I believe next year Thanksgiving falls 1 week later, so we will not be the same week as Thanksgiving. But we were proposing to move it to the third Monday there. So if there are no objections, that will be our meeting schedule for next year. A couple other things to mention.
Melissa, Commissioner Dix?
Yes.
I was just curious as to why you addressed November. I appreciate that, but why July, the fourth Monday in July?
Well, the calendar is not memorized in my head, but I believe the second Monday is very close to the 4th of July. So traditionally, the Planning Commission has taken July off. However, we have found that of late, the workload in terms of plan amendments, if we take July off completely, often means that we have an August meeting that goes really, really long. So this last summer, we were able to take July off because there were not that many county plan amendments that came in that would need to have that hearing. I will make every effort to have July as a free month for you all, but I ask that if you could reserve that date on your calendar for a possible meeting. The plan amendments that are typically scheduled for a July hearing, we get those applications in April 1st. So once they come in, I will know whether or not we had one year when it was so many that that on top of the ones for the city of Tampa that are scheduled for August just made for a huge hearing. So we've been trying this, reserving a date just in case.
And again, it's certainly your prerogative to make that suggestion, and that's fine. It just was confusing to me because, the 4th is on a Thursday, so, not having it on the 8th, I guess, makes it so everybody has a 5-day holiday, which everybody needs for the 4th of July. But then the following would be the 15th.
Right.
And I wouldn't understand why it wasn't the 15th, because it gets kind of tight between July 22nd to August the 12th.
I'm very open to changing it to the third Monday. Traditionally, again, in the bylaws and procedures of the Planning Commission, if a second meeting is needed in a month, it's the fourth Monday, so that's why I picked that one. But we can do the 15th if that's your pleasure, too.
No, I was just curious as to how the thought process was.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Melissa.
Okay, I've just got a couple other things to mention, if that's okay. I did want to mention a couple important things that happened as part of the November election. I'm sure you all are aware that we passed the transportation tax, which has a lot of great implications to our work, and I think we'll make our discussion in our workshop about the 2045 population projections and allocations a little bit easier, because we have some money to talk about transit that could really be a catalyst for redevelopment. But that is a really big milestone. It also comes with 1% of the money is allocated to the MPO for planning purposes. And so that is going to be something that, as Beth and I are working through what that means, how that works, we'll be coming to you with more information about that in terms of how we plan to utilize that money. Also in the election, the constitutional amendment to expand the property tax exemption did not pass. And that's something that for the last 2 years, as I've been looking at succession planning and budget, have been allocating at least a 5% budget cut coming down because of that alone. So it's kind of a big sigh of relief for us as an organization that we don't have that budget cut looming in that same way. So I have been evaluating our succession succession planning as we're as Steve Griffin is retiring, Pedro Parra, Randy Kranchek, and Sam Dennis. We've got 4 big retirements in this calendar year, and looking at probably a budget amendment to go to the county in January to reallocate some of that money into some additional positions so that we can have some additional staff to do all the great things that you all laid out in your strategic plan for us to do. Then lastly, I just wanted to point out 2 handouts that are at your seat. We had Terry Egan, our librarian and project manager, had a best practices piece published in the October Planning magazine, so very proud of that. And also you have an updated, we have a lot of staff changes and we'll have to update this again in a couple of months, but a new organizational chart with the pictures and titles, so hopefully you'll get to know who all the staff are. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Marino?
Thank you. I'm glad you mentioned the referendum because I was at a meeting last weekend. You would have thought that there wasn't anything that happened, and at least in my job, Wednesday morning, the world had changed. So, but in the charter amendment, there's the Independent Oversight Committee.
Yes.
And in going through the capital project plans you got today, and comparing our role versus the Oversight Committee, at least it seems to sort of my non-legal mind that there may be some overlap, because the projects, if I understand the charter amendment correctly, the projects come from the individual agency to the Independent Oversight Committee. The Oversight Committee then has the ability to say, well, wait a minute, you're not following what is the intention of the amendment.
Right.
You have to go back and redo it. And then in our case, we get those project plans from the agencies, we approve, and then send it back. So there's an extra level of oversight for that the referendum funding. And one of the other things I thought of too is that it seems as if you could have a project that fits with the theme or mission of the referendum and the way the percentages are split up, but it may not fit with a comprehensive plan, and vice versa. That you could have something that is in the comp plan, but let's say it's roads, and you spend all your money on a specific type of road project. You may be in violation, or you may be opposite of the intention of the referendum, and vice versa. So, at least for my own purposes, it might help to have an understanding of how our role relates to the role of the Oversight Committee, because the Oversight Committee, I think, is the reason why a lot of people supported it, because they felt there was that check. But it is a different type of group than the Planning Commission in terms of expertise, in terms of who can be on the board, who cannot be on the board. And then they are looking at annual projects, if I'm not mistaken, and we're looking at 5-10-year ranges. So it's 2 different things, and I just think it's important for something else to figure out. I mean, the money starts flowing January 1st, so it's not like this has to be. We actually have some time to kind of determine that. But then the last point I wanted to make too, it passed every precinct, if I'm not mistaken, in the city of Tampa. It passed all but one, Plant City. It passed the entirety of Temple Terrace. And the overall percentage was, 57% approval. So, whatever we could do to make sure that this thing goes right over the next 30 years. So the quicker that we can solve that type of interaction, I think the better off we're all going to be.
Absolutely. And the MPO does have a role of supporting the Oversight Committee in certain ways, like meeting logistics, things like that. The percentages that are outlined in the ballot language mirror what is in the long-range transportation plan. There is a role of the Planning Commission in finding the long-range transportation plan consistent with the comprehensive plans of all 4 local governments. So there's coordination there. I would agree that there, as these annual project plans are brought forward, how that interrelates with the CIPs. I mean, one would the project needs to be in the CIP for them to spend the money on it. So I think there would be a correlation there, but yes, there are going to be things in the CIP that they can't spend that money on, like a road widening. That's not allowed with this money, but it could be, they could use other county or city monies for. And so that would show up in the CIP. We'd be looking at, we're looking at consistency with the comprehensive plan. The oversight committee is looking at consistency with the language in the charter. But yes, the roles are certainly close together, and I think each of the there are a lot of questions still about how it's all going to work, how it's all going to come together. But I will be keeping you informed about that.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is other business, chair's business. I don't have anything, so I'll move on to old business. Any old business?
Sorry.
Okay, no old business. Any new business? Actually, I do have something I wanted to mention, and I'll let Melissa elaborate a little bit more on it too. I met a woman, professor from University of Kansas, planning professor. She's doing a research on reinventing staff reports. She just recently met with the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission, and she asked, and I passed it on to Melissa, if we would be interested in, you know, she's looking at the staff reports, looking at reinventing them, and hoping to come up with maybe a better way of presenting information. She said it'd probably be, she'd probably have to meet with us at some point if we were agreeable and wanted to do it. Probably be maybe a couple hours where we'd have to meet with her, and she'd probably give us a little bit of homework and want our opinions on what works, what doesn't work in terms of staff reports. I thought it sounded like a novel idea. We'd be the third. She's met with San Francisco. She met with the planning commission in Georgia. We'd be the third group, and she's looking at meeting with planning commissions in different parts of the country. And she's going to take that feedback and try to, like I said, revamp staff reports to make them more useful for planning commissions as a whole. I thought it was a novel, a neat idea, and I thought we might want to participate, but I wanted to mention it to Melissa and see what her thoughts were, and then maybe see what the board thinks. So I'll let Melissa.
Yeah, I reviewed the information that Commissioner Thrower provided from this professor, and it looked very interesting and very valuable to get some outside feedback on our staff reports. The thing I noticed was that it was time intensive on your all's part because you're the focus group that she wants to meet with. So whether it's reviewing the materials ahead of time or participating in the focus group, I suggested to Commissioner Thrower that we bring it to you all to see if there was buy-in to, because you'd have to devote some time to it.
So any comments, questions, thoughts?
Yeah.
Commissioner Joseph?
I'm a little bit hesitant. I mean, I'd like to see, I guess, what her materials were, what her, her hypotheses are, what she's trying to get out of it. My only reason for saying this is I think our staff does a great job with their reports. Our staff reports I've seen the change from the time I've started on this commission to now, little things that they think, a person like me wouldn't notice because I'm a commissioner, little colors and words that match maps and things like that. Our staff, I think, has a real clear way of presenting the information that I haven't found a problem with as a design professional. I think their way of conveying the information has been pretty good so far, so I'm kind of hesitant to invest time in something that I don't really feel might be that necessary. And that's just my opinion. I don't know how everyone else feels. I'd like to hear from others.
Any other comments, thoughts? Commissioner Willman?
I would agree with Commissioner Joseph on that.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Commissioner Powell?
Do we have that available now?
Yeah,
we could.
Yeah, we can share the materials that she forwarded from her work with the group in San Francisco, and y'all can take a look at it and see what you think.
Is it digital?
Yes, yeah, it's all stuff she emailed. Yeah.
So you can just send it to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Something we need to decide on now, or can we decide on it later?
No, I think we can.
We'll send it to you all, and then it'll go under old business.
Yeah.
Next month.
Okay. We'll have, let's forward that out and see what everyone thinks. Okay. Next up, committee reports. Any committee reports? Well. Nope. Commissioner Wilds?
Yes, the Plan and Design Committee did have a follow-up meeting after our event, and we've gotten some good feedback from those who were there and those who were there for the first time and those who were not. It's only because when I had spoken to Lynn earlier, she and I thought it would be really great if some of the people who went for the first time would be at our meeting. So that's why we were trying to wait a little bit. And they showed up and they spoke up. And we got some had good dialogue. So we have some plans we're going to put into fruition for next year, including our date. We're playing with dates because our fourth Thursday is falling on I think it's on Halloween. Yeah. So we're going to have to play with another date, another Thursday or possibly a Tuesday. So we'll let you know what works out. But she's now making she's making contacts with Pepin and some other avenues so that we can come back with a better plan for you in January. We hope to have that for you.
Okay. Any other committee reports?
Right here.
Nope, Commissioner Rogers.
We've had 2 meetings of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee for the City of Tampa since our last Planning Commission meeting, one on October 9th and one on November 13th. And the city is preparing their 2019 to 2022 local housing assistance plan. And as part of that, and really what the committee's really been working on, is the list of incentive strategies that go into that plan that encourage affordable housing development within the city of Tampa. So we've been working with city staff on editing and finding really new incentives to put on that list. So the committee's working on that. We are going to meet again on November 27th to finalize those incentives. That will go into what they call the LHAP, the Local Housing Assistance Plan, and that'll get submitted somewhere around the March 2019 timeframe.
Okay, thank you. No further committee reports. Before we adjourn, I did want to mention we're going to have a workshop in the Plan Hillsborough room immediately following this, and then we have public hearings beginning at 5:30 today. So if there's no further comments, the meeting's adjourned.